Louis the Blind was born in about 880. He was the son of a man named Boso, and his mother was a woman by the name of Ermengarde. She was the daughter of the Holy Roman Emperor Louis II. In 879, Boso set out to take Provence after the death of Louis the Stammerer. Louis had left two sons whose claims Boso had treated with the utmost contempt, while he resorted to a combination of persuasion and bullying to get influential men to support his claims to power in Provence. However, he wasn't successful in winning everybody over to his cause, and the two heirs to Louis the Stammerer, one called Louis and the other Carloman, were raised to kingship to counter Bosso's claims. As such, Bosso's time as King of Provence was dominated by warring against Louis and Carloman, and in 882 he essentially lost most of his territory after being besieged at Vienne by his own brother. Boso was not a popular man. He was viewed as a usurper, which is exactly what he was, and treated with hostility, not only in his own realm, but by other Frankish rulers as well. One chronicler even suggests that the other kings made their vassals swear an oath that they would try and take Boso out. Such was Boso's popularity at the time of his death in 887. While all that had been going on, his son Louis had been born in 880. The timing seems to have been quite opportune for Boso, as he had not only seized power the year before, and so perhaps hoped that the birth of an heir might stabilise matters, which for him was unfortunately not the case. Like a lot of other children born into power in 9th century Europe, Louis came into a world dominated by infighting and corruption. On the death of his father when he was aged about 7, Louis and his mother moved to ensure that they stayed in power and visited Charles the Fat to establish their claims over the kingdom of Provence. The emperor, who was by now in poor health, recognized Louis as king of Provence and adopted him. However, not long after, Charles was deposed by Arnulf of Carinthia, and Louis had to establish power for himself again, which he managed to do in the early 890s before he paid homage to Arnulf of Carinthia. In the early 900s, Louis began to reach an age of maturity, and in keeping with this, his power and influence grew. In Italy, there was a growing restlessness with how the country was being ruled by Berengar I, and so the nobles invited Louis to take over, and he was promptly crowned emperor in 901. It wasn't to last, however, and Berengar reclaimed power the following year, and brought Louis to terms. A couple of years later, however, Louis went back on the peace agreement, and this is where he earned the nickname of the Blind. Berengar, mimicking something usually seen in the Eastern Roman Empire, rather than totally eliminating Louis, instead had him blinded in rather cruel fashion. This spelled the end of Louis's brief period as emperor, but he would remain king of Provence for another 23 years. Louis kept his travels to an absolute minimum, residing in his capital for the majority of the remainder of his reign. He seems to have been quite a popular ruler, with one chronicler continuing to call him the most glorious of emperors, despite his having relinquished that title long ago.